All right, thank y'all for tuning in. Um, Obviously, we're out of court this week. Generally speaking, we'll have two terms, say August 1st and then August 8th, we'll be in court. Then the last 2 weeks, we won't be in court. When we're in court, we have two judges each time. So one judge is doing pleas, one judge is doing trials. Then, of course, the other days, everybody is back at the office getting ready for August terms of court. So we've got a trial roster that's out, and the people that are first, second, and third up are really preparing on those. Later down the list, generally, if the top two plead out, then you may, as a prosecutor, you may find yourself in court at the second's notice, but we try to prepare, put most of our work into those first two or three. All of those are always going to be murder cases or armed robberies or something that legitimately needs a trial. So this week we don't have updates. We updated last week with the murder trials that went down. This week I want to talk with you about roles within the courtroom. The easiest way to think about it is the litigants, the prosecutor and the defense are almost, if you think in terms of a football game, one will be one team, the other will be the other, and you play offense and you try to, that's part of the prosecution, is you go through and you have to follow the rules when you're doing it. The people that you will see in the courtroom, of course, the centerpiece is the judge. They wear a black robe. In South Carolina, they generally do not have the gavel that you see on TV a good bit. But the judge's role is simply to make sure that the state and the defense gets a fair trial. So the judge has a set of rules that he must follow, or he should follow. Take, for example, the rule of hearsay. That means that I can't elicit testimony that the witness that is giving the testimony doesn't have personal knowledge of. In other words, Ricky couldn't take the stand and say, yeah, I heard from word on the street that Aunt Rhonda said that she heard from Uncle. That's hearsay. It's just what would he have heard. So if I were to elicit that, or if a witness were to start down that road, the defense attorney would stand up and say, "Objection, Your Honor, it calls for hearsay," and the judge would sustain that objection. If the defense made an objection and the judge ruled with the state, then the judge would say, overruled, ask the question. The judge is not there to be a litigant, and sometimes a lot of the judges that we have are there. They were at one time a defense attorney, so it's hard for them to take off that robe, to put on the robe and forget about being a defense attorney. But that is what they are required to do, to follow the law, not to have a stake in it, not to cheer for one team or the other. You know, we would not allow that for a referee to wear a Dallas Cowboy uniform, or we wouldn't allow them to wear a Washington Commander uniform, because they're not there to cheer for one team. That's what fans are for. The judge is there to make sure that everything is fair. At the end of the trial, or at the end of the guilty plea, the judge takes on a different role, and that is of sentencer. So they've heard everything that the state has put up, they've heard everything that the defense has put up, and then they are supposed to use those same rules that lay out what is this charge worth. A jury has just found this person guilty of manslaughter, that gives the judge the discretion of going as little as 1 year, as much as 30 years. So their role shifts at that point to just being a sentencer. And then, of course, above and beyond that, as soon as a person goes to prison, they're convicted or they plead guilty, they're given a pen and a box of paper, and they start writing appeals. And that's for another day, but that is the appellate court, the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, that will review what our judges have done and determine whether or not they were right or wrong. There are other players in the courtroom besides the judge, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney. Those players, of course, you elect a clerk of court. Our clerk of court in Horry County is Renee Elvis. Our clerk of court in Georgetown is Alma White. Those guys are there as record keepers. They maintain the records that the judge would use of the filings that have taken place ahead of time. Another person in the courtroom, if you've watched TV or if you've visited court, you'll see a woman either typing full-time or speaking into a mask. That person is the court reporter, and they are responsible for providing an adequate record of what was said at the trial, so that the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court will know exactly what the wording that was used at a trial. That's the major purpose for the court reporter being there. There are witnesses that come forth, state witnesses, where we send a subpoena and say you must appear in court on this date. That we try to meet with them or talk with them ahead of time to find out what their testimony is going to be. Sometimes that is impossible, but those people are there not because they want to be there, but because they are court ordered to be there, and it is the state's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what we say happened actually happened, that this defendant is guilty. And we do that by putting up witnesses. There are bailiffs that are in courtrooms that helps to keep us all safe. You know, you're dealing with some people that are accused of different crimes, and the bailiff is employed through the sheriff's office to make sure that everybody is safe. And I think there will be people there from probation and parole and pardon that at guilty pleas that will be responsible for the defendant if they plead guilty. So there are people from probation and parole that will take them out and tell them, the defendants, the duties that they owe to the state while they're on probation. And of course there are jailers that are there if a person is convicted and has to go to prison. The sheriff's office takes custody of them either after a guilty plea or after a trial, and takes them to a lockup room at the back of the courthouse. Go downstairs, get into a van, go back to J. Reuben Long Detention Center here in Horry or in Georgetown. They take them back to the jail, and from there they will be taken to a prison to serve the rest of their sentence. So that is sort of everybody's role that you would see in a courtroom. Some of the reasons that they do what they do, why it works in some cases and doesn't work as well as I would like to see it in other cases. But that's kind of a highlight of what happens in the courtroom.